Hey everyone, Savannah here, and today we're going to be drawing this ghostly walk image just in time for Halloween. Everything you need to follow along in this video is linked down below. That includes the color palette, the outline, as well as a link to my brushes. So let's go ahead and jump right in. The first thing I'm doing is changing the background, so go to layers, click that background color, and make sure you're in the palettes tab. We're going to scroll up until you find that ghostly walk color palette, and I'm going to do one of the lighter blues. Now I do change this slightly later down the road, and I'll show you which color I change it to, but for now just stick with that lighter blue color, and then create a new layer, bring it below the outline layer, and we're going to fill in the ghost. So grab that light gray, almost white color, that circle brush, and trace and fill in the ghost that we have here. And then we also have a ghost shadow on the water here, or reflection on the water here. So we're going to fill that in as well. And once you get that ghost done, we're going to create a new layer and work on the tree line. So go into your tab, click new layer, and we're actually bringing that below the ghost because these trees are behind that ghost. Then I'm grabbing that dark cyan blue color. I chose this blue one because it's a little bit more muted of a dark blue color. As you look further out in the horizon, things get a little bit more dull in color. They're not quite as vivid. And so that's why I want to replicate here. I also turned the outline layer off, or not the outline, but the ghost layer off because it was hard to see where those tree lines were coming down. And so I just went ahead and turned that off. And I'm just going to start adding in trees to this background. Now, you don't have to follow my outline exactly for the trees. I know the lines are a little bit confusing just because of, there's multiple layers of trees. We have 3 different layers of trees. So just add trees where you want. You don't have to follow, again, like I said, for the template, but you definitely can if you want to. But we're just going to trace and fill in a bunch of the trees here, and then we'll work on the layer up in front of that in a second. And I'm just filling in a lot of spaces where I think you'll see this dark color in the background. I'm not doing just tree branches everywhere. I'm filling in a lot of the space because there might be multiple trees in that section, or maybe it's the leaves on top of the tree. So I'm just kind of filling it in right now. And as I'm doing the next layers up, I can kind of tweak where I want these trees to come in, or maybe the second layer up, I'll have trees in front of it where I thought maybe originally I have these trees in the background. So just keep building it up. As we do these new layers, you'll kind of see it coming to life a little bit more. And once you have the base color down for this and you're happy with how it's starting to look, let's go ahead and create a new layer right on top of this. And we're going to grab a darker blue color for this. Now, I originally grabbed the very dark color because I wasn't sure if I wanted to do the trees in the front yet or not, but I'm actually going to do that middle layer. So for this one, I'm grabbing that darker, there's multiple colors with dark cyan blue name, but if in the color palette you're looking, it's that third one down on that first row, or that first column there. So it's that darker blue, even darker than the one that we just used. We're going to use that for the trees in this middle ground here. And again, you can follow the template if you want to, or if you want to change the shape of the trees, you could definitely do that as well. And again, we're just going to trace and fill it in. And I kind of go off a little bit here. I don't copy exactly the template that I have. So you can follow along in this video if you want to add more trees here, or you can keep it to the template, whatever works for you. But I just want to add a little bit more to this mid layer, more trees, because I thought just having 2 trees wasn't enough. I wanted more. So I'm going to add a little bit more here before we move on. Now let's create a new layer, and I'm actually going to bring this layer in front of the ghost because this layer is in front of the ghost in this image. And I'm grabbing that dark grayish purple color, and this I'm going to trace and fill in the front 2 trees here. I modified the shape of them just a little bit. You can again follow the template if you want, or you can follow what I'm doing in this video. But I don't modify them too much from the template. So if you stick to the template, then that's absolutely fine. But I just want to tweak them just a little bit more, add some more kind of these roots kind of coming up on the tree on the right. I added them to the left tree, but not the right. And I wanted to add a little bit of that and a little bit of the tree going into the water. So that's what I'm tweaking here on these 2 trees. But other than that, I'm just following the outline, tracing it, and then filling it in. And once we get all this blocked in, these colors blocked in, we'll start going in and alpha locking all the layers so we can add in details. We have the lanterns to add, the glow from those lanterns. This ghost is a little bit glowy as well. So we want to add those details in. But once we, like I said, get all of this filled in and locked, we will start adding those details. And most of my drawings this month have been pretty cutesy, mainly because I have a little toddler who's starting to get into more the Halloweens, not necessarily spooky because she's 2.5, but more the cutesy Halloween side of things. So I want to have these be a little bit cutesy, but I also really love watching scary movies in the month of October with my husband. So I am going to try to go a little bit spookier towards the end of the month. So make sure you're subscribed to my channel to see those videos. And this part is the time where you want to modify the shape of your tree. So I'm adding a few more branches. I'm adding a little bit more spookiness to it, a little bit of these like curled branch edges, because once we have this section complete, we're going to alpha lock and add details. So you really want to make sure that you have the base shape done before we start adding in those details. And this is where I realized the background's too bright, so I'm going to go back into that background layer and select one of the darker cyan blue colors, and it's looking much better for me. Now we're going to alpha lock all of these layers, and then we're going to work on the tree line in the very back. With that tree line, I'm just going to add very minimal details. I'm just going to take a square brush, a slightly darker color, slightly like lighter color, and then just do some vertical lines here. So I'm going to grab the square dark brush. I'm grabbing that blue color we used for the background and going a little bit darker than that color that we have. And then I'm just going to start drawing in some vertical lines here to make it look like there's even more trees than there are. But again, I'm not doing too many details here on this background layer because it's off in the distance. We don't need to see a lot of details. It would be muted anyways. But I'm also, like I mentioned, grabbing slightly lighter colors. I'm using that square light brush, and I'm just adding some color variation with the tree line here. And then once we have that done, we'll move on to the next tree. Now with this middle tree line, I am doing the same technique. I'm grabbing that square dark brush, going a little bit dark with that color that we have here, and I actually turned the alpha lock layer off for this because I wanted to add just a few more trees. Like I mentioned earlier, I wanted to add more trees to this layer, and so that's what I'm doing here. And then I'm adding a few kind of branches off of those trees, not too many because this is again a little bit further back, so we don't need too many details for these trees, but I'm just adding a little bit. Still using that square dark brush for this. I just turned down the size of the brush a little bit. And once you're done adding those trees, go ahead and set that to alpha lock, and then we're going to work on the water. So I'm going to use the fact that we have this light blue color as the background color in the water. So we're not going to do a new layer and fully fill it in with water. We're actually going to just grab darker colors and some of the mid-tone colors, that square blend brush, and we're going to add some of that on top of this new layer that I created. So we're creating a new layer above the ghost layer, and we're just adding in these horizontal stripes following the shape of the water here. And this is a pressure sensitive brush, so it's very blendable. The lighter you press, the more that original color down below, that watercolor, will pull through. The harder you press, the more the pigment that you have selected will pull through. So have fun varying with that a little bit, but I'm just pulling in a little bit that darker blue. I'm pulling in the same color that we use for the trees to give a little bit more shadow underneath of where the trees are. And we're just gonna keep building up the water layer here with various colors. Now the water that is down by the trees are down lower part of this image here where those darker trees are. I'm going to make it a little bit darker up where the that medium tone blue or that middle layer of the tree lines are. I'm going to go a little bit lighter because that's where the reflection of the ghost that's a little bit glowy is going to make it a little bit brighter. So I'm making that section a little bit brighter and then the front section here darker. And I'm just going to keep building up colors. So if you go a little too dark than what you like, just grab one of the lighter colors and just go over it. Again, we're using that square blend brush, so you don't have to completely redo it. You can just very lightly lift those colors up, or maybe you went too light, you can bring those colors down. So I'm adding in some lighter colors, some white here. I brought the size of the brush down a little bit because I want to kind of make it look like ripples in the water, just a little like very tame ripples, but I want a little bit of distinction here. I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to grab a lighter color for this front area. I'm also switching to the circle blend brush for some of this. You can use a square brush, the blend one, or you can use a circle blend brush. Just depends on if you want sharper edges or not, but I'm just going to very lightly go across the surface here of the water. Again, doing horizontal lines here because that's kind of how the way water flows, right? And so I'm just going across with these horizontal lines, pulling in a lot of different colors to build up the water here. And I'm going heavier with the lighter, almost white color in that back area here because again, that's where that ghost is going to have that glowy reflection on. And I'm adding a little bit to the front here. Now there is a little gap in between these two trees. So I'm just going to make sure that the light kind of comes through a little bit in that section, but not towards the edge of this front area. Now I am going to turn that ghost layer back on because we do have that reflective area here from that ghost. I'm going to try and blend out a little bit. I'm actually going to use the smudge brush for this with that square blend brush as the selection there. I'm just going to blend this out a little bit with that smudge tool. The reason we don't want it to be the exact shape of the ghost is because when you have a reflection on the surface of water, it's not the exact shape. There's a little bit of it going out on the edges because the way the water moves, right? And so we don't want it to be the exact shape. So that's why I'm kind of blending it out a little bit. But I also want to add a little bit more white here, especially in the front where beyond these darker trees are, because there's a little bit of that reflection kind of peeking through. So I'm going to add a little bit of that, and then I'm going to do the same thing using that smudge tool, blend that out a little bit with the water. Now I'm happy with the water. I'm going to work on that middle tier of trees. I'm grabbing a lighter color here. I'm still dark cyan blue color, but it's lighter than the color we use for the trees. And I'm using the circle blend brush and just adding in some vertical lines to give it the illusion that there is a tree, that there's some details here. I'm not going too detailed with this layer as well because again, it's a little bit further back. I just want a little bit of that illusion. So I'm going mostly towards the center where the ghost is, and then very lightly not going out towards the edge. So you'll see what I mean here as I'm building up these layers, but I'm using this color here to go out further, and then I'll grab a lighter color to add more detail closer towards the center, and then even lighter color to go really towards the center. I'm not trying to go too far out to the edges because I want them to be a little bit darker. So that's what I'm doing here. Just adding in a little bit of detail, and I started with a darker color and working my way lighter because it's easier. I want to set where that darker color is going to go out, and then on top of that I can start adding in lighter color. So like I said, go a little bit out with that medium color, a little bit more in when you get brighter, and then even closer in when you get the brightest, which is going to be the white color. So I'm just adding in a little bit of the detail here, and then we'll work on the trees in the front. And I like using the circle blend brush for this because again, as you can see here, I'm doing light brush strokes to kind of give a little bit of that illusion and blend this in. And then if I want a little bit more of that color to pop and pull in, I'll press a little bit harder on that brush. But I can kind of play with how much or little of that color that I'm using is pulled into the scene. So that's why I really like using that circle blend brush. You can also use the square blend brush if you want to as well. And like I mentioned, I'm using the lightest colors really as close to the ghost area as possible because that's where the brightest glow is going to be. So I'm not going out further than that. I'm just going a little bit where that ghost light would be kind of hitting, not trying to overdo that area. Now I'm happy with that layer. I did decide to add a little bit of color variation to the trees in the very background. So I'm going to grab a slightly lighter blue color, still using that circle blend brush. I'm going to add just a little bit of detail here as if that glow is kind of hitting it from the front here, but I'm not going too heavy with it, just very light touch, and then we'll work on those trees in the front. So let's go ahead and create a new layer. I'm actually going to add in the lanterns and I'm using the dark pink just to block the color here. I'm going to trace one of them and then I'm going to copy and move it over to the other side. Now I did end up just copying it over and then doing all the detail on the one on the right and then just copying that and bring it back to the left. Instead of doing details on each, I was debating if I wanted to do the details for each separately or if I wanted them to be matching. It's easier if you just do one lantern, completely get it done, and then copy paste it, move it over to the other side. I did do that, but if you want it to be a little bit more unique, make them a little bit more different than each other, then definitely doing them each individually is going to give you a little bit more distinction. So I'll show you how I do one of them. I, again, duplicated it once it was completely finished and moved it over so they're exactly matching on both sides. But if you want to do it uniquely, then you can just follow along with one of them and then do the same technique for the other one. And I'm just going to go in and touch up the areas here in the lanterns because I am going to set to alpha log. We are going to add some details to this, but I want to make sure that it's all cleaned up before I set that to alpha log. Now on a new layer, I made a layer underneath the lantern. I'm grabbing this very light yellowy orange color and I'm adding it behind the lantern. I'm doing this on a separate layer because I want to add a glow effect to it and copy that and make that a glowy effect. But then also we're adding details to the lantern itself. If we had that yellow with these kind of lines over top, it would be hard to do details on those. So now we're going to add details to the lanterns. Make sure you set those lanterns to alpha lock and we're grabbing an orange color. Using that circle blend brush, I'm just going to add in the bright light reflections on the lantern here. So I'm just lightening it up where that light would be hitting. And I'm just using the orange color for this. I'm not going to pull in too many other colors. I'm keeping this pretty simplified as a drawing because I don't want to be too complex. I don't want to pull in too many colors. I want to make it as easy as possible. So that's why I'm just using orange. But again, because we're using the circle blend brush, you can really pull in a lot of different colors based on how hard or soft you press that brush between these, that dark red color and this orange color. And now that I have one of them done, I'm just going to duplicate it. So to duplicate the object, or the layer, you just swipe left on that layer and then select duplicate. And then you can use that, there's a pointer button there. That's how you can move the layer around. You can just use that to move that over. But again, if you're doing the lanterns individually, then this is where you'll want to do that other lantern. And I also merged down the layer because I want the lanterns on the same layer. I'm going to duplicate the light layer that we have below them and use that as a light source as a different blend mode to just brighten them up a little bit. So that's why I put them on the same layer. Now I duplicated that orange light layer and I'm changing the blend mode. I started with lighter color, but I actually ended up changing that. But for this layer, you do want it above the lantern layer because that's what's going to give it a little bit of that glow. What I did change it to was soft light for this because I like the looks of that soft light. And then I did a Gaussian blur on it just to blur it out a little bit. And now on a new layer above the dark trees that we have in the front, I'm going to start adding in some of the color here. So I'm grabbing orange. I'm using a circle blend brush. I'm just going to lighten it up. Now, similar to how we did the tree line in the middle there, the lighter colors I'm putting more towards where the lantern is, and then I'm going to blend it out darker as I go further out because they're not going to be as bright. So I'm just placing in the lighter color along where that lantern is going to be hitting, and then I'll kind of blend it out with some of the orange. So I'm using the yellowy orange color now. We have another orange color that we can use to blend it out towards the edge. And then if you go um, too bright out, which I did a little bit, you can bring some of that brightness back in with the either original color that we used for the tree, or there's other colors too. So I pull in some purples as well to these trees just to give a little bit color variation. But I'm just going to start adding in, similar again to the trees that we did in that middle layer. I'm going to start adding in some of this light that would be hitting the different um, bark of the tree or the different branches that are coming out. So we're just going to keep building up this layer. And I might not have mentioned this, but we did set this layer to clipping mask, so make sure you do that so it doesn't go outside those lines. And we're just using that circle blend brush for this entire section. And again, because this is a pressure sensitive brush, you can press harder towards the where the lanterns are and press lighter towards the edge, and that's going to blend very nicely. I'm going to do that with the orange as well, but with the yellow here, I'm pressing a little bit harder along the edges where the lantern is, and then just lightly going towards the edge because that light is kind of fading as you wrap around that tree here. So that's what I'm trying to mimic with this brush. Now I'm grabbing that orange color and I'm doing the same thing, but I'm going more from kind of the middle out with the tree, if that makes sense. So I'm not going to the edges where the lanterns are because I want those to be the lightest color. So I'm just using the orange to go on kind of the rest of the tree, and I'm going to darken it. So it's a very bright tree. I mentioned we can pull in some darker colors to darken it, but for now I'm just adding in a little bit of light here, and then we will darken it and bring that light a little bit more closer to where the lanterns are. Now I'm going to grab that dark pink color, and over some of the sections of that orange that we just added, I'm going to add some more of that dark pink. Now I'm going in very lightly, which is why you're not seeing a lot of that color kind of being pulled in, because I still want a little bit of that orange to pop through. But if you want to, you can pull in a little bit darker. I do in a couple of the edges, especially as I go further out away from the light. I'll do a little bit darker, but over the orange, I'm just very lightly pressing that brush. And now I'm grabbing that dark grayish purple that we used to fill and trace and fill in that shape of the tree originally. And I'm going over a lot of the areas to darken it on the outer parts of this tree because it was starting to get a little too bright for me. I want a little bit darker tree to give a little bit more of that spooky vibe for these trees. So I'm going a little darker again towards the outer part. I'm not completely covering what I just did because I want some of that color still to pull through. So you can see a little bit of the orange and a little bit of the purple still pulling through, but I'm going to darken it just by using that circle blend brush and just varying my pressure that I use on that brush. Now I'm going to add a new layer. I'm going to set that to clippy mask as well. And with the orange color, I'm going to add a little bit glow to the trees. Now I did change the blend mode in this video here. It cut out to when I actually changed it to the one I wanted. It shows I use soft light, but I actually use lighten for this, and I turned the opacity layer down a little bit. I'm just going in and adding a little of that light over certain areas here. I'm not going over everything, just a few spots to brighten it up a little bit. Now I'm happy with how that's looking. I'm going to go to the ghost layer and I'm going to add in the eyes of the ghost. So I'm just going to grab this dark pinkish color for the eyes. I'm bringing the brush size down and I'm just using the circle brush for this. So you can use the circle blend brush if you want to, you just have to press harder for it. But I'm using the circle brush for this and making these eyes. I'm going a little bit bigger on those eyes, but we're going to add eyes to our ghost. And then just to give it a little bit of color variation, I have a little bit darker blue color to the left of the white that I'm going to use with the circle blend brush to add a little bit of color variation to our ghost. And now that our ghost is done, we're going to change the blend mode on this layer. Now I am going to duplicate it and do two different blend modes, but for this first layer, I actually end up using pin light. I'm showing you kind of the different options here that you can use, but I really like the look of pin light for my ghost, so that's what I ended up using. And I also brought the opacity down a little bit. I want this ghost to look like it is see-through. I want that opacity down. And so that's why I'm changing it. And then I'm just double checking. I don't want any other blend mode, but I did end up using pin light for this. Then I duplicated that layer. So like I mentioned, I did two different blend modes. So on that bottom blend mode layer, I end up using lighten color for this and bringing up that color because I want a little bit more glow to my ghost. And so that's why I did two different blend modes. And with those final touches, our image is complete. Thank you so much for following along. If you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe to this channel. I have a lot more Halloween drawings coming up, so you don't want to miss them. Also, let me know in the comments what would spook you the most if you saw it in the forest. See you in the next video.